David, maybe before we jump into the tools, do you want to tell us a little bit about how we evaluated each of these?
That's right. What was it? That's right.
That's right, we did evaluate them.
That's right. Good job. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Prompt and Circumstance. My name's David.
And I'm Elon.
And today it is part 2 of the track meet. All right. The long wait is over, and it's time for part 2 of our roundup of 4 vibe coding tools: Replit, V0, Lovable, and Bolt. All right, in the previous episode, we saw the 100-meter dash, which was a test of speed that Bolt won. We then saw the long jump, which was a test of depth and precision, which Replit won, and we will be deploying the winner of each of these events. Now, if you're interested in the prompts, leave us a comment, and we will DM you with the link. All right, before we get into the pole vault, Elon, what are your thoughts so far on all of these events?
I've been surprised at the spread of the scores across all of the tools. I was expecting them to be maybe a little bit more clustered, but in both of the events that we've seen so far, we've seen some really high scores and some really low scores. So that's been something that I'm keeping an eye out as we go into the last event. I think we should also remind folks that if they haven't watched part 1 of the track meet, pause this episode right now, go into your feed, listen to the previous episode, or if you're on YouTube, watch the previous episode, because that will catch you up to where we are today.
That's right. You know, one of the things that I also noticed was that even the worst performer produced something that was quite good. You know, they were all reasonably good, especially given how quickly they were able to produce it. You know, even when we did the 100-meter dash, the last place contestant, Replit, it was still only a few minutes that it took in order to produce something that was quite good, that, again, a human would never be able to match the pace of.
That's true, David. I heard once a comedian talking about how when Wi-Fi was first available on planes, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then within 6 months, it was like, the Wi-Fi is not working on the plane. Like, you're in the sky and you have internet. Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the bar that we're setting for these tools. It's like, can you do this thing fast that 6 months ago I couldn't have even imagined a tool doing at all?
Yeah, absolutely. It's phenomenal, the change that we are seeing here.
Well, with that, do you want to take us into the pole vault? But first, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Do you have a side hustle? Why not? If you're worried about validating your market or finding time to build your product, then Collab's Validate and Build will help you out. They'll go out and ensure that users really want your product, and then they'll build an MVP so that you can have your first paying customers. They'll hand off the product to you, and you can take it from there so you can run your side hustle. Click on the link below to find out more, and let them know David and Elon sent you for $250 off.
Yeah, all right, let's get into it. So, the pole vault is about testing how well these tools can handle complexity. We are going to give it an enormous prompt. It's going to involve not only logic that it needs to figure out, but also calling APIs, doing integrations with other systems.
In fact, it was so complicated, I think I had to read the prompt like 4 times before I understood what was going on.
All right, well, maybe that's a hint for me to explain what exactly we are doing with this prompt.
Yeah, let us know a little bit about that, David.
All right, so one way that these models are being tested is in terms of benchmarks. And one of the benchmarks that's really interesting to me is this thing called the graduate level Google Proof Q&A. And what this does is it tests the models on a variety of graduate level questions from science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. So these questions are posed as multiple choice questions, and boy, are they complex. And what the model needs to do is correctly guess what is the right answer. And you can see on this page, in terms of how these models are performing, not only do you see their performance overall in terms of percentage accuracy. Like here we have Claude 3.7 Sonnet achieving a mean accuracy of 79%. But you also see the compute that it took to get there. So you can see here that Grok, although it did all right with 68%, it took a great amount of compute in order to get there. So what we will be doing with this application is we are going to be retrieving a question from the GPQA Diamond dataset and then asking the LLM what the answer is going to be to see just how exactly it answers.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing is that Grok likes to turn on the microwave with nothing in it just to get a little bit of a better response. But some of these, like Claude, are a little bit more efficient. Like maybe they just nuke the thing for 30 seconds and then eat it.
That's right. Yes. Warm on the outside and frozen in the middle burrito. All right. So what we'll be making today is an application that will allow a user to provide the API keys for these integrations so that the application can retrieve that question and then run that question against the LLM and then check to see whether the LLM had responded correctly. Also included in scope is the ability for saving of the history of responses, because we want to see how these LLMs do over a variety of responses.
David, before we launch into the tools, do you want to tell us how we evaluated them?
And so here are the 10 criteria that we will be evaluating these tools on. Number 1, it needs to save the API tokens and hide them. Number 2, it needs to be able to fetch a random question from the GPQA. Number 3, it needs to be able to execute that question against the selected LLM. Number 4, it needs to disable the run button while it's waiting for a response. Number 5, it needs to show the response from the LLM correctly on the UI. Number 6, it needs to save the history of what the AI responded with. Number 7, it needs to be able to allow the user to remove the token after they've saved it. Number 8, if there's a problem with the token, it needs to surface that to the user in a toast. Number 9, it needs to be able to support the width that a mobile phone would reasonably have. So something like just a few hundred pixels wide. And it needs to be able to do that without any horizontal scroll bars. Number 10, in addition to supporting the mobile width with no scrolling horizontally, it needs to ensure that there's no text overlapping in that mobile setup.
And David, how did we score these against those evaluation criteria? Because LLMs, as we know, are probabilistic, so they don't always come out with the same response each time.
That's right. We gave them 3 attempts overall to accomplish 10 out of 10 on this rubric, just like with a pole vault. And with each attempt, we gave them 4 fix opportunities where each additional fix actually had a penalty. So if it one-shotted it, then no penalty. If it needed a fix, then that would be a half-point penalty per fix. So if it needed 4 fixes in order to get to a working state, then that would be a penalty of 2 points.
All right, so we've got a pretty high bar for these tools to clear. So let's get into it and see how they did. All right, so let's start off in V0. This is the last version of the tool that it created. And what we see here is we've got our main page where we can evaluate our runs. We also have the ability to update the prompt template. And we have a history. And we can go to settings and we can see that the credentials that we've put in are saved. We can also see that the tokens are hidden. And the storage is also encrypted, so the tokens are not available in the storage. And actually, for V0, that ended up being an issue. I don't know if you can see it in your screens, but one fix that I had to ask V0 to make was it couldn't decrypt its own encryption from the background. So it was creating a new key each time. So that was the one fix that it had to do. And After that, it ended up with a 10 out of 10. So it hit all of the criteria. So let's give it a try here and show what it does.
Let's see it in action.
So here we got one question from the GPQA data set. I'm sure you already have the answer in your head.
Yeah. When in doubt, go with C.
That's right. But we're going to try and run this against an LLM. We have set this up with GPT-4o Mini. And so let's click there and see what happens. So this is telling us that it gave the correct answer. It gave the response B, and it also had the rationale for that response.
Excellent. You know, one of the things that our audience ought to know is that part of the response from Hugging Face for the GPQA question is also the answer. What is the correct answer? And so the UI here has a button to let you show what the correct answer is.
So we can confirm that GPT-4o Mini actually did get this correct. I did check in the call to the OpenAI API, and the call is not providing the answer. And on the other side, it is reproducing the rationale word for word with what was sent back by OpenAI.
Outstanding.
So this is what we got.
And it stores it in history too, does it?
That's right. So we can then go to the history and we can see that we had two questions here. This is the one that we just opened up, and we can see the question, the options, and the response.
And a beautiful UI too. You know, it's minimalistic, but it certainly works. So how did V0 do in the end?
V0's top score across 3 attempts was a 9.5. And that was on this attempt, where it was docked half a point because it needed one fix.
The encryption fix, where it locked itself out of its own home.
That's right.
All right, so let's move on to Lovable. All right, so here is what Lovable ended up creating. It created a very simple page where we do have the settings here for API tokens. So let's open that up. We got a nice little dialog. Let's go ahead and put in our tokens. And now with our tokens put in, we can see that the model it's selected is going to be 4o Mini. That's cool. The URL is correct. So now we can go and retrieve a question from Hugging Face. Excellent. So these toasts down here are quite nice as well. And here we have the GPQA Diamond question talking about an aperture with shapes like an n-sided polygon. Let's run this against GPT-4o Mini and see what it says. And it looks like 4o Mini chose the correct result, C. And we can see the full response here from GPT-4o Mini, which is quite nice. And so now we can see that it is going to add it to the history. And you can see that I've had some previous runs where 4o Mini did not have a correct result. And it's a nice little dialog we've got here as well, very nicely laid out. Clicking onto one of the previous runs, we see that it is going to draw the results of the question and answer outside of the modal window, which not correct, but this is not something that we are evaluating. We are only looking at whether or not it does keep that history. So that's all right. Okay, so this was Lovable's second attempt, and it actually got full marks. So it was able to save and hide the token. It was able to grab random question. It executed that question, and the buttons were disabled when it ran. It was able to pull out the correct answer and got the history right. We can come over here and remove the token. And so if we come over here, remove this API token, like so, I cannot run the Hugging Face query. And then now if we were to shrink this to the mobile width, it's going to work. So full marks on the second attempt with Lovable.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, this was a really detailed PRD that we uploaded. As we talked about before, there was a lot to get done here. It's kind of amazing that it one-shotted and got everything right.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, since it aced the pole vault on the second attempt, so I gave it the opportunity to flex a little bit with its third attempt. So on the third attempt, I gave it the same PRD. However, I also added in the additional complexity where I told it to make the page styled according to our logo. And here we go. This actually also aced the pole vault. And again, it was one shot. So here we have a credentials area laid out a little bit differently, but everything here actually works. So it's quite nice.
This is really cool, David. And nice flex, Lovable.
Yeah, good job.
How about Replit? How did that do?
Yeah, so here we are with Replit and what it created. And you can see here, this is the third attempt. I told each of them to flag which attempt it is. So on the third attempt, it got 9 out of 10. So let's walk through what it created. Now, this layout is quite nice. It has a bit more color than what Lovable's second attempt had resulted in. Let's come over here to the API keys. And in this modal window, it's a single window where the user can enter all of their keys. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, and now with the 2 keys that we're going to use entered into here, you might notice that there's some nice additional UI in here that was not called for, but a pleasant surprise. Like for example, just below the field for the Hugging Face API token, there's a little link that says, get your token here. And what a delight that Replit has figured out that there is a link to get your API token. And you might notice that there's a little security notice up top in the modal where it gives the user confidence that the API keys are going to be stored locally and encrypted. So that's a nice little bonus as well. Let's go ahead and save these credentials. And now back here, let's get a random question. All right. Elon, how's your chemistry doing? How's your chemistry skills?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I could get this. Let's see how the tool does, but I have the answer in my head right now.
You have it in your head, right? Yeah. So here's the great question about 336 trimethyl hepta 1,5-DN41. And we're going to go ahead and ask OpenAI. And we're going to choose what interestingly is going to be 4.0 as opposed to 4.0 mini. And it is 4.0, so it took a little while longer. But nevertheless, here we go. Not only did it take longer than mini, it also got the question wrong. All right, Elon, I'm sure that you did not guess C, and I have utmost confidence that you would have guessed A. A was the correct answer. Ah, yes, that's right. Now over here, we have the recent history that the user can use to view previous responses. Now, there is a bug in here where when the user clicks on this, it actually doesn't show the question. It actually shows the answer, but the question remains the same. It's the old question. So if only we had evaluated on the fact that it would show the original question, there would have been a point not attained here. However, it is something that is stored in the history, so it does get points for this ability. Now, if we come over here and we remove the Hugging Face token, let's save those credentials. If we attempt to get a random question, it's going to not only give me a toast saying that it's missing the token, but another UX delight here is that it automatically opens the credentials management modal so that the user can right away enter in their token. Let's close this, and we are going to now size this down to mobile sizing. So as we shrink this screen, it does quite well. Now, what happens though is that when we scroll down, you can see that because of the choices that Replit made, it actually ends up with elements that leave the card. So this run on LLM button, it unfortunately is drawn outside of the card, and that is where it lost the point. Now, no text is overlapping, so it got full points, well, the full 1 point for that criterion. So, Replit got a 9 out of 10. I think there are some good things, though, about what Replit has created. I do appreciate the use of color throughout. I appreciate some of the UX that it has added by itself. That was certainly delightful.
I do like how it did this. It looks pretty nice compared to some of the other tools that had a pretty muted overall design. So here we see Bolt. I didn't pull it up in its unconfigured state, but this was the best attempt that Bolt put together. So we see here that we have a little settings modal up at the top right where we can add in our tokens. We can also edit them. They are blocked out in the UI, but interestingly, Bolt was not able to encrypt the tokens in local storage like we asked across all 3 attempts. So it lost points there each time.
What did it do? Did it store it in as plain text?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yep. So we have our settings enabled, and we're able to pull a random question from the Hugging Face database. In our settings, we can see that it's chosen the model for us, GPT-4o. So we're going to save that, and we're going to try and run this question against the LLM.
And this is another chemistry question, it looks like.
It is testing your chemistry knowledge here, David.
Well, I know that it's not B.
I'm glad that you eliminated that one. So we can see here that the latest response is B, and now we can see the history of responses, and we can reveal the correct answer as well. One element of weird UX is that you can only reveal the answer in the history. You actually can't do it in the response itself, nor can you do it when you pull the question.
I think we left that up to the LLM
That's right.
to largely decide, and that's an interesting difference in design. Speaking of design, I do like the choice of color here. I mean, in addition to the buttons being green and things wrong being red, the choice of a magenta violet gradient and some of the purple that it's got there is quite nice.
If you're watching this, you may recall that in part 1 of the track meet, the V0 snake design used the exact same magenta gradient in its page. So definitely an artifact of the underlying models that really like this purple gradient.
I think I'll have to have a look out for this purple gradient on websites that I visit. Then I know who generated it.
That's right. It'll be one of those things like the M dash in ChatGPT responses.
That's right.
All right. So when we go into mobile view, we can see that Bolt did structure the page pretty well. Everything is compact. It used flex blocks so that the elements position themselves well on the page. However, when we go into settings, we can see that there is an overlap here, and so we do have to horizontally scroll to be able to access all of the data, and that lost it a point as well. So overall, this was 8 out of 10, and the 5 tries lost it 2 points for the fixes, so we got a total of 6 for Bolt. Overall, Bolt was never able to get a one-shot response. It took 5 prompts each time for Bolt to get a working product. While the judges tally their results, let's hear from one of our sponsors. Are you having trouble wrangling too many data sources to get answers to your product questions? Querio's AI agent sits on top of your data stack and connects the dots so that you can get product insights at your fingertips. I use it personally, and it saves me hours per week. You can try it too. Go to Querio.ai and let them know that David and Elon sent you, and they'll give you 2 months free of Querio.
we now have the final scores for all 4 of these vibe coding tools. So in first, we've got Lovable with a full 10 out of 10. Next, we have V0 with 9.5 out of 10. And Replit in third with 9 out of 10. So the top 3, very close race. And Bolt rounds it up with 6.
So the thing that I find interesting here is that all 3 of Replit, Lovable, and V0 were able to get a working product from our PRD on the first or second attempt, whereas Bolt took multiple attempts each time. And that's really where it struggled compared to the others.
Yeah, I really wonder whether that is something down to the system prompt or if it's due to other factors. Maybe Bolt just had an unlucky day. That happens to pro athletes too.
One of the interesting things about that, though, is we already noted that it's clearly using the same underlying model from some of the styling cues that got repeated between some of the tools. So, as you said, even though it's using the same models, just that system prompt or a bad day can really affect how the tool does.
All right, so after these 3 events, let's see how our 4 contenders stand. All right, so we have a 3-way tie for most gold between V0, Lovable, and Replit. And to break the tie, we see that V0 is the only one of those 3 that has a silver. All 3 of them also have bronze. So, V0, congratulations on winning the very first track meet for vibe coding tools. So it turns out that because Bolt did not complete the scope of what it was supposed to do in the 100-meter dash, it got penalized after the judges reconsidered the results. So it got a 1-minute penalty, which brought it from gold into silver. That's what gave V0 the extra gold. It gave Bolt the silver, and the rest of the standings stayed the same.
Makes total sense. I like how those judges were thinking.
Me too. All right, now you might notice that we have a tie for second between Lovable and Replit. So, Elon, what should we do?
I think we need to have a runoff between them and add a bonus 4th event. What do you think, David?
All right, let's do it. A bonus head-to-head.
So, David, for the 200-meter dash, we are going to be pitting these tools head-to-head on building the site to host the results of the track meet. And the grading here is going to be really, really precise and scientific. How are we going to grade them?
We're going to grade vibe tools on vibes.
I love it. All right.
Let's do it. So what we're going to do is attach the new PRD that we've got, and we're going to tell it to go ahead and make those applications. All right, and after a few bug fixes, Lovable finally has something ready to show. And it looks like we have 2 very similar looking pages. However, on the Replit side, we have text leaving the box. That's not so good. On the Lovable side, we have something that looks quite nice. Some horizontal scroll bars. I don't know about that. What do you think, Elon?
Well, David, I'll say one thing, which is that Lovable did take longer, had a bunch of errors to fix, but when push came to shove, it did deliver. It delivered only in a little bit longer than Replit did. And the overall UI UX is a little bit cleaner to me. So for me, it's Lovable. How about you?
I feel the same. Even though it had some stumbling blocks, those things were easily overcome. And so the overall layout of it, where things are tabular like this, and by tabular I mean using tabs as opposed to a table, my vote's with Lovable as well. So congratulations to Lovable for winning second in the neck and neck tiebreak in our inaugural track meet.
What an exciting event. Congrats to V0 on your big win. And that'll wrap up our inaugural track meet.
All right. So where do we go from here? You tell us. Are there any tools that we ought to be reviewing? Are there any other track meets that we ought to be running? Let us know.
Leave us a comment And otherwise, you can find us on all the socials at P&C Podcast. You can like and subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Thank you, everyone, for listening. See you next time.
See you next time.